Mohandas Gandhi was born in British-ruled India. And as a young man, in order to be successful, he tried his best to become an Englishman. He went to England to study law. He practiced Christianity. He dressed like an English gentleman. He tried to speak and to act like an English gentleman. But he discovered that no matter how English an Indian tries to be, that the English still only saw an Indian. That disappointment motivated him to look again at what it meant to be a people living in an occupied nation, to have one's religion, one's culture demeaned and attempted to at least extinguish it from common practice. And so Gandhi made the decision to return to the religion of his homeland and to resume dressing and behaving in a way that reflected the culture of his people. For a while, I think it would be fair to say that he was something of a sectarian Hindu, but as he spiritually evolved, he began to accept all world religions as having certain insights and certain blind spots. He famously replied to one person who was questioning him in a public forum about whether he was a Christian. American Christians always wanted everyone to say that they were really a Christian. And he is famously said to have replied, we don't know for sure because it wasn't recorded or reported immediately, but allegedly he said, "I like your Christ, but I do not like your Christians. They are so unlike your Christ." I don't know that he actually said that. We kind of want to think he did because it's quite quotable. What we do know that he said, and something I think that we should pay more attention to, Gandhi said, God has no religion. God is not a Muslim. God is not a Buddhist. God is not Confucian, nor is God a Jew or a Hindu, and God is not a Christian. All the religions of the world are an attempt by a specific culture in a particular time to express their most deeply held beliefs about their object of greatest concern and their highest values. I always ask my students in my world religion classes to think of every one of the religions we look at as a different language. Christianity is a language that tries to speak of God, but then so is Judaism, and so is Buddhism. And just as you cannot say that French is right and Spanish is wrong, it makes no sense to say that one religion is right and another religion is wrong. It does not mean that they're all the same. They are not all the same. They have some points of agreement, but they have some huge differences. But, there's a reason why most opera is written in Italian. I mean, I don't know if you've not been to Italy. I like to go to the market in Italy and just listen to mothers and daughters argue over shoes. It sounds like they're singing. The Italian is just a beautiful language, and it works well for writing something sung in an operatic style. It doesn't mean that Italian is right and German is wrong. It's just that when you hear the two languages sung side by side, unless you're from a cold place in the north of Europe, you are inclined to like Italian singing. Regional languages are going to have some advantages in the way that they describe the experience of people who live in that region. That's why when those of us here in North America read the Bible as a Western-produced document, it makes sense to us much more than when we try to read the Quran, which is written in a much more Middle Eastern mindset. It does not read well for North Americans, but that does not mean that it doesn't make perfect sense to people reading it within the culture in which it was written. But God doesn't have a language or a religion. Religions are our way of trying to describe the divine. Everyone here grew up being primarily influenced by the Christian language set, and so we are the most comfortable with those images, those symbols, that language to express our faith. But really, if you were going to be living in Tibet and you were going to try to share your faith experience, would you try to convince Buddhists to believe in the Trinity? You really wouldn't, would you? Would you try to convince a Hindu living in India to believe in substitutionary death and atonement and incarnation? Now, some people would. I mean, there are people, obviously, who would do that, but we don't go to that church anymore. The second of the 8 points that we print on the cover of our bulletin every week says, by calling ourselves progressives, we mean that we are Christians who affirm that the teachings of Jesus provide but one of many ways to experience the sacredness and the oneness of life, and that we can draw from diverse sources of wisdom in our spiritual journey, which I think is an important and profound statement. Though I truly think that Michael Franti says it much more succinctly in his song, East to the West, when he just shouts, God is too big for just one religion. I think that's one of those quotes that I think we just need to hold on to, that the essence of the divine, of what we mean by God, is really bigger than Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or Confucianism. Still, we almost always base our services here at this church on a text from the Christian Bible. And more than that, it's almost always a selection from the Common Lectionary. I still try to pay attention to the Common Lectionary because that sort of, in a synchronous way, keeps us in conversation with all the other mainstream churches in our area that also follow the lectionary readings. But I'll admit to you, when I try to give our musicians a basic sermon outline a month or 6 weeks in advance, so that they can pick hymns that you will lustily sing with gusto. But there's 4 readings provided in the lectionary from the Bible, and I read them, and sometimes I just don't find much there. It's important to me that I not waste your time. I don't want you to have to drive all the way out here to this church and sit here and listen to me talk to you about way back in Bible days. I need to be able to say something to you that is relevant to our life experience. And sometimes it's hard to find that in those readings. But today is the first time in my 33 years of preaching that I have chosen a text not for what it offers, but specifically because I want to disagree with it. Reverend Mel read for us this rather labored passage in 2 Samuel about how God commissions the building of a temple. And I would like to go on record as saying that I do not believe that the Lord God Almighty is interested in either architecture or real estate. That's not God. I do not believe that one mountain is more holy than another one, or one building is more sacred than another one. Again, I'm going to go back to Michael Franti as a poet. In his wonderful song, Hello, Bonjour, he says, every bit of land is a holy land, and every drop of water is holy water, and every single child is a son or a daughter of the one earth mama and the one earth papa. Let's be factual about this. Cities build great religious temples, mosques, or cathedrals in order to make their city seem more important, more powerful, more wealthy, and superior to the cities that don't have as wonderful a mosque, temple, or cathedral. There is, in the mix, sincere devotion and a desire to give honor to God. But you know the difference between a city and a town? I mean, technically, do we live in a town or do we live in a city? Do you know what the difference is? June, I know you know, because Brits came up with this. It's if you've got a cathedral. If your community has a cathedral, you're a city. Otherwise, you're a town. And what town doesn't wish it was a city? When you're a tourist in Paris, you're going to go to Notre Dame. You'll probably go to Saint-Sulpice. When you go to London, you're going to visit Westminster Abbey and St. Paul's. When you go to Egypt, if you go to Cairo, you're going to go to the great mosque there. If you get a chance, you're going to go to the temples of Karnak and Luxor. The ancient Judeans Samuel, did not have a directive from God to build a temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. The building of the temple is how David wanted to solidify the divided tribes of Judah and say that Jerusalem is now your capital and I am now your king, and this is the center of power because this is where the big God house is going to be. Ever since we were children, though, we have known that God doesn't need a house to live in. God doesn't need a building. The very suggestion of that is blasphemous. But what we need to accept with the same certainty is that God also doesn't fit into your box, or my box, or the Jewish box, or the Muslim box. God doesn't fit in a house, and God doesn't fit into your religious box. And once you can accept that fact, then what we realize is that we are having to give up a certain amount of religious certainty. And that is why there's not more of us here on Sunday mornings. Most people really want certainty. They don't want to believe, they want to know. They want to be confident in the face of a certain death and a possible judgment. And so even though they can't really know, they can't be certain, they choose to act like they are. Progressives choose honest uncertainty over false certainty. It's not easy, especially not easy at first. It can be frightening. But most of us here came to the realization that we were more angry about having been lied to and manipulated by religion for our entire lives than we were afraid of living with a certain amount of uncertainty. People will say that wars are fought over religious differences, but I'm pretty sure that's total hogwash. Governments use religion to whip up the simple-minded to make them go fight their wars, but government doesn't want to go to war over religion. Governments go to war over wealth and real estate and power. They just dress it up in fear and religion so that they can get poor people to be willing to die in a war. Let me know if I'm going too fast for you. We acknowledge that a great deal of our religious belief is based on faith and hope, and about those things, we need to be liberal in allowing other people to believe differently. What we in this church have elected to focus on is what we can know. As a matter of faith and practice, we believe that love is superior to hate, that forgiveness is better than resentment, that poverty, hunger, homelessness, violence, and illness are not divine judgments, but rather they are opportunities for us to show radical, self-sacrificing compassion. They are opportunities for us to practice our religion of love. We will work for peace, and we will sacrifice to avoid war. We will love our country, but we will often show our love of country by being defiant and challenging our government when our politicians lower the ethical standards that it takes to be a great nation. We will teach our children to love God by first loving one another without regard for race, nationality, sexual orientation, class, age, or appearance. We will challenge one another to care for our earth and for one another just as we care for ourselves. And we will speak up for justice, even when no one else is willing to speak. I don't believe that God told us to build a temple or a cathedral or to build a box of any kind. We'll just fill our boxes with our sacrificial compassion, and we'll take it into the streets wherever it's needed. And that will be our creed. That will be our doctrine. And that will be religion enough.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.